Hey, good morning, and thank you for joining us once again with KEDA's series on COVID-19 and your business. Our goal is to provide you information as we go through this together. We are joined today by Sandra Davis and Monica Blackwood, who are going to provide some insights and tips on moving forward in phase 2 as we prepare for phase 3. As always, we remind you that KEDA continues to update our COVID-19 page with the latest information on funding relief, updates on any grant opportunities, what local resources are available, and the most recent posts. Please note that today, Jaime is ready to answer any questions you have about the PPP rules regarding forgiveness. They've changed them again, and she is on top of that. And you also still have until June 30th to apply if you have not done so for that loan. These are the recent additions to our website. Last week we had the author of the Kitsap County Pathway to Recovery Playbook. Awesome book. I encourage you all to check it out, as well as the other tools listed in bold on this site. And then I think we want to do a couple of polls and then we'll be ready to go. So we have a couple of questions today just to determine who is here. So which apply to you regarding the loan programs? You've applied for both, you've received funding from either or both, or you've not applied. And then if you answered no to the first one, we're just curious why you have not. Did you find other resources? The whole payment and forgivable portion is confusing. You figured out how to move forward without it, or other. And if you check other, we do request that you make a comment in chat just so we can help other folks know what you found, and because we're curious. Just a couple more seconds. Ending the polling. So 50% of those responding have not applied. So they may be interested in what Jaime can update us on later. And then if you have not applied, you can make it without it, yay, or other. I'm still waiting for the comments. 501c6, so that's there twice. Yes, we know that is a unfortunate circumstance. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm just going to quickly go to what sectors are here today. Which best describes the sector you represent? And I apologize, I realize now I didn't add nonprofit. Hospitality, food, beverage, retail, personal services, professional services, defense, government, education, real estate and finance, wholesale supplies. More participation on this one and going more quickly, so I'm going to stop. And I think this is the winner almost every time we ask this: professional services. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Monica Blackwood. Monica always has great information for us. Not only is she an ongoing person to answer questions weekly, but she's willing to step in whenever we need her, and we truly appreciate that. Thank you, Monica.
Sure thing. Happy to be with everybody again. I am going to go ahead and share my screen and get this PowerPoint going for you guys. All right, so joining in today, I thought, you know, I've talked about phase 2. I've talked about kind of more overarching COVID-19 issues and so forth. So I thought I would take a different turn today and really focus in on a couple of things that if you go through the phase 2 documents that the governor has posted up on his website, in every single set of guidelines that is given to each industry, it is required that you have this COVID-19 site supervisor in it. And it's also required that you give specific employee training. And so I thought, you know, I might as well just kind of dig into that a little bit more, because each business, when they open, they need to make sure that they are following these guidelines. So we'll start with phase 2 and beyond requires a COVID-19 supervisor, and it requires employee training specifically on COVID, along with so many more things that get very specific to industries as well, but focusing on these 2 things. First of all, the COVID-19 site supervisor, in the documents, it says a site-specific COVID-19 supervisor shall be designated by the employer at every location to monitor the health of employees, students, patrons, and so forth, and enforce the COVID-19 safety plan. This is a position that is new, and it is required for each location that you might have as a business. This supervisor must be on site for all shifts and available at all times. So given that, you're probably going to have more than one, right? You're not going to have one person on 24/7. And this position also must keep safety plans current with the changing guidelines that happen on a daily or hourly basis on the information that we get. So the site supervisor can drilling down a little bit more into the specifics of what that position would likely include for duties. And of course, this isn't an exhaustive list, but covers a good portion of it. The site supervisor is going to ensure that the safety plans are posted and updated. These things, as required by the guidelines, you have to have them written and you have to have them posted up so that people are aware. The site supervisor is likely going to be the person in charge of the employee training that happens. They are going to be the person that is in charge of screening of employees. So they might be doing these things, or they might be just ensuring that somebody else is making sure that these things happen. But this, again, is a brand new position that you are going to have. They are going to know and understand what to do if an employee falls ill during a work shift. How do you respond to that? How do you take care of that employee? How do you minimize risk to others, and so forth? They're going to know and understand how to care for possible contaminated areas, how that area needs to be cleaned up, how it needs to be treated, who can go in and out of it, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to know how to report exposure and or positive results to governing authorities. They are also going to know and understand how that happens within the organization. If an employee comes in and says, I've been potentially exposed, they are going to know the right steps to take to report that appropriately to those who need to know within the business. Again, maintaining confidentiality, of course. I've mentioned that before. They are also going to know and understand the physical environment and how the traffic flow is going to go through your business. Understand, of course, the distancing aspects that need to happen, schedules, contact information for individuals, vendor information, all of that. So that's where the physical environment comes into play. This I mentioned is a new position. It doesn't mean necessarily that you need to hire somebody specific for it, but you might. It's kind of the options that you have are adding the add these duties of a position to another position that you already have. Say, for instance, you know, a shift manager or whatnot. You're going to add the duties to a specific individual potentially, which may not have the managerial title, so to speak, but might have the right personal characteristics to take over these duties. And that's something that you really want to think about. Is it a managerial thing, or is it based on who you have that can really handle and kind of be successful in following these duties and guidelines? Because that might not be a specific position that falls under managerial. It might more be something that's specific to individuals. Then you can also just create that as a brand new position, hire for that role and so forth, which you know, that all depends on you and what you want to do. Once you identify who those individuals are, you want to make sure that you get them trained. They need to be intimately familiar with your COVID safety plan, because they're the ones that are taking ownership of it, and they're the ones that are making sure that it happens. They need to be connected in with resources to stay current. Your safety plan is going to be a living document, especially for a long while, where we are learning more and more about COVID on a daily basis, and how that information informs how we change our safety plan. So these individuals, the site supervisor needs to be on top of that information. And then, just as an example as well, the Red Cross has recently come out with a 1-hour online certification, returning to work during COVID-19 safe work practices. I did this course over the weekend, and I know that it is accessible to people. I believe that it's about $20, but I know how to get you connected if you're interested in having that course run for your site supervisors. I can connect you with some people that can provide that for you. And again, it's online. It took me about an hour to do, but it had some really great information that I will also mention. That site supervisor, one of the duties, of course, is going to be that employee training that is also required by the governor's guidelines to reopen. So each individual employee needs to be trained on safety specific to COVID-19. And this is, again, enforced by the site supervisor. It's a good idea to make sure to take attendance at those meetings. You can have one person record all the people that attended. You could do a sign-in, but you want to be aware of the pens and the multi-touching of the paper. You don't want to pass the clipboard around, things like that. So think about how you want that to happen. You can send your written document out to your employees prior to them coming back on board, just to give them the opportunity to review and familiarize themselves with it. That first day, you're going to treat this training kind of like as a re-onboarding process, where you want to make sure that they understand and have been walked through the aspects of your plan and how to keep everybody safe. The employee training. So here's a slide of some things that you want to make sure that you cover in that employee training. Of course, you want to make sure that you reinforce the message that if somebody is not feeling well, they need to stay home. Other components of this COVID-19 training would include what exactly is coronavirus? What is the coronavirus disease? That's the COVID-19. How different is it from other coronaviruses that have been out there and we've been exposed to for a number of years? How does it spread? Signs and symptoms of infection. Give some data and stats about what the current pandemic looks like, where the cases are, where some of the hotspots are, other data that you might be able to access. If it's local data, that's great. And if you want to take it regional or national, that's fine too. Also include what to do if someone has been exposed or infected with this coronavirus. Diagnosis and treatment. Here you want to talk about, you know, going to the doctor and getting a test done and what kinds of treatment might be available to them. Occupational risk. There are some sectors that are at more high risk than other sectors. So you want to talk about that. You want to talk about measures to reduce the risk. And this is where OSHA and the CDC guidelines come in. You want to make sure your policies and procedures match those guidelines. A really important key here is also talking about your employees' home safety plan and their home hygiene, because they might be exposed to it somewhere else, not inside their workplace. And if they have it, that exposure at home, how are they going to take care of that individual that might be exposed? Do they have a plan in place to handle that, as opposed to figuring it out on the fly when it comes up, and then potentially bringing it into the workplace? You want to talk about PPE, and yes, you can put it on, but how is it the most effective way to take the PPE off? This is one of the things that they kind of went in depth on in that Red Cross training that I did, of how to properly take off your gloves that you've been wearing so that you don't expose yourself as you're taking them off, and making sure you pinch the heel of your hand and pull the glove off, et cetera, et cetera. Same with how to remove your mask so that you don't accidentally expose yourself that way. So some really good, interesting tips through that training. You want to talk about workstation barriers. If you have meetings that can't for some reason be virtual or on the phone, whatnot, then make sure your doors and windows are open so that you have proper ventilation and so forth. And then the mandatory requirements that you're going to do as people come in for their shifts, whether it be questionnaires, temperature checks, signage, social distancing, hygiene, PPE, sanitizer, etc. So all of these things are really solid things to cover in your employee training. So kind of dove into that. Now I'm going to switch gears and kind of go at left field, or come out of left field for you, because hey, it's 2020 and everything is all over the place, right? I wanted to address a couple of things, a couple of new observations and trends that I've been noticing. First of all, you know, phase 3 guidelines are beginning to be published. The governor's website this morning has 2 things posted up there for phase 3. The first one is really important that you guys can access. That's a template for a written safety plan that is required for each business to have open. So there's actually a template now. You can go in and fill in the blanks, kind of thing. So that is posted up there. And the other thing that's posted up there is guidelines for sporting events, especially for youth activities and so forth. But there's nothing else at this time posted up there that talks about, you know, industry-specific things as far as allowing more customers to come into your place of business and so forth. So keep an eye on that as we move towards phase 3. I'm sure that will be populated some more. Again, industry-specific organizations are also going to have guidelines for you to follow. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, kind of out of left field, is remember that, oh shoot, sorry. Remember that all other HR laws and policies are in place. There is starting to be a rise in overstepping in interviewing questioning. This is really important. When what's happening is that employers are looking to rehire people, and they're looking to bring people back initially in work from home positions before it transfers into work from office positions. But what's happening is that questions are being asked about what the what an individual's situation is at home. Do they have children at home? Do they have elderly parents at home? Do they have things that are going to cause them to really be distracted during what would normally be work hours? Companies and leaders and interviewers need to be very, very careful about how they are asking these questions. There are ways to ask questions. There are ways to set expectations that say, you need to be available between 9 and 5 or whatever those hours are. Is there anything that would preclude you from being able to meet this requirement of the job? And they then have the opportunity to say yes or no. They don't even have to explain what it is. If they say yes, they just are aware of it. Please don't open the door inadvertently on yourself by asking borderline illegal or illegal interviewing questions just because you're trying to figure out if they're able to work from home. So be really careful about that. Also, another aspect is, you know, the ADA and how this plays into all of it. You might already have employees that have been, that have had ADA accommodations, and in some cases, you want to think about those who might be still subject to the governor's proclamation about making sure that elderly and vulnerable populations for COVID are still covered. They can't, they don't necessarily have to go back to the workplace at this time, and that was just extended earlier this week, and it goes through August 1st. So really be creative and be engaged in your accommodation process as you go through these things to make sure that you're following what you need to. And then there's a fear of workplace claims. I am seeing this across the board in the nation about organizations and companies being worried that if they bring people back and then somebody contracts COVID, that then they're going to claim that it's a workplace issue and to L&I and so forth. And that is a valid concern. And there's not yet a clear guideline on that, other than go back, make sure that written safety plan is up to date and it's a live document being followed, that you've got your site supervisor, that you're following trainings and policies, that you are really honed in on what OSHA and the CDC are looking for in order to keep your people safe. And if you do that, that's the best advice that's out there right now. You know, people are going to claim what they're going to claim, but you can hopefully say, hey, look, I've followed what I need to follow right now. And just a few other trends from the HR world overall is that organizations are starting to focus on skills within employees that drive the organization and give competitive advantage. So when you're interviewing and so forth, you really want to think about that. Designing for resilience, not just efficiency. So as you're working through your people plan of sorts within your organization, it's not just about this efficiency here, it's about resilience as well. And another thing that I have seen as a trend is human resource professionals are really digging into the collaboration efforts that have been sprung out of this COVID situation. HR organizations and online communities are just on fire with the amount of conversation that's happening to keep people safe and best policies and best trends and so forth. So I suspect that that collaboration within the HR community is really going to continue and be kind of a mainstay now, and that makes things a whole lot stronger for all of us and your organizations. And then I just thought I'd share really quick before I get to these comments up here, the resources that I pulled together for this specific presentation. Obviously, the coronavirus.wa.gov website, that's also where you can find the Safe Start Washington information. There's the Returning to Work During COVID-19 course that American Red Cross has. Also, I found, and I like to not necessarily reinvent everything, but borrow from good examples that are out there. The State of Vermont's Department of Labor page has an employee training presentation template. So you could go there and take a look at their PowerPoint that they put together for all of their businesses to use as a template for that employee training. You don't have to start from scratch. You can use that, augment it, make sure that that aspects that involve Washington's plan and Washington's guidelines are appropriate in that template, but you don't necessarily need to start from scratch. And then, of course, the Back to Work toolkit that we've talked about in the past. And then my contact information. And that should be about it. And I will stop sharing and go to some of these comments unless Kathy tells me otherwise. Okay. I think we're back.
Okay, yep, we're back. I'm not seeing any directly related to workforce safety right now.
Good.
That doesn't mean I might ask later. Teresa did note that she will be posting the link for the Red Cross training on our website.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's about $20 if you go directly through the Red Cross. If you use an authorized provider, which there are some out there that I know in our community, it's potential of it being a little bit less, but even so, I mean, $20 is not that much.
It's not that much.
Exactly.
No. So I need to do one last poll before our next speaker. This is kind of the bridge between Monica and Sandra's presentation. So we're in phase 2, moving forward. Please check all that apply. You feel good about opening in this phase. You have enough PPE to meet guidelines. Your business and team have a plan to move forward. You're concerned about a second round. Your business actually did better during this crisis. I found new ways to connect to market and to clients. I'm so sorry. I will maintain some of the new tools and strategies created for the shutdown in phase 1. I increased my online presence. My sector doesn't open until phase 3 or other. And if you check other, again, please note that in chat. Give a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the polling. So, tied for the top, your business and team have a solid plan to move forward, and you're going to keep this new tools and strategies and move forward with them, which is good to hear. I think we've all found some things that we didn't realize we could be utilizing to expand or build on, so that's great news. Next, I would like to welcome Sandra Davis. We've been working with Sandra for a while, but in a different capacity through a different program. And I'm excited to have her share with us. And she does have an economic development background, so that's exciting as well. So Sandra, please share anything else about yourself you'd like, and the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And let me find the right thing to share with you. Okay. All right, I think we're ready. So just a little bit more about me. I do have an economic development background, but also have a disaster preparedness background. So I've been working with people both on their disaster plans as well as their continuity plans. And by training, I'm a facilitator, a coach, and a mediator. So as we look at what's going on right now, I'm finding my skill set in particular is coming to bear in a new way in terms of what the needs are in the world. So today what we're going to do is I've really focused us on what every business owner's new job is, because I'm finding that life has changed. My role 4 months ago is totally different than what my role is today. And then there's 3 key questions that I'm finding that we need to ask ourselves at each phase of what's going on with COVID. So I'll share with you from those perspectives, and I'll also, I'd like to invite you to really engage in this and do it a little bit different than how we've done some of the presentations, and let's see what we can do to make it more interactive. Because I think learning from you is as important, if not more so, than anything I might have to say regarding the topics I'm going to cover. So our new job. For each of us as business owners, there's a lot to consider, and we're finding it's taking us more time to manage our business. We need more resources, and sometimes different resources than what we've learned in the past. And we're learning a lot of new things, thinking about COVID, thinking about PPP, IDLE, some of the other programs, and how it is, what those resources are that are available to my company weren't even things that were on the horizon 3 months ago. And yet I'm spending a lot of time learning and trying to keep myself up to date and up to current about what it is I need to do as a business owner to not only keep my employees safe and to move my business forward, but also be in compliance. So when Monica's talking about the site supervisor and the safety plan, all of these are things that even though we might have other people in those positions, we need to make sure that we're aware of and we're engaged in. So we're also finding that we need to make some different decisions, and we're making decisions in our businesses almost on a daily basis, where I might have had a quarterly strategic plan and a 3 to 5 year outlook as to where I'm headed. Now it's like we're in this cycle of continuous improvement, and the situation is changing so frequently, sometimes even daily. So your job, your new job, actually spans things like COVID planning, as well as business response and recovery. And nestled within that is this whole idea of continuity and how it is you're going to continue to move forward over time, continue to improve, and eventually get to this new place of normal. So I'd like to kind of move into sharing some stories and really learning from each other. So part of this session is going to be conversational with you. And I'd like to invite you to raise your hands and participate. If you're not comfortable doing that in terms of a real-time dialogue, then please put into the chat what some of the things are that you've learned as I ask a series of questions. So we're all needing to adapt to the COVID world and stay-at-home orders, as well as the the start safe reopening activities. So within that, your creativity and dedication and entrepreneurial spirit are really just inspirational. I've been listening and participating in these sessions week after week, and I continue to be inspired by not only the presenters, but also by the comments and the questions and everyone's dedication. I think it's one of the things that really makes Kitsap great. and it's something to be proud of and something to share. It's part of our story together. So my first question has to do with adaptation, and I saw from the poll that many of you have adapted. So every business owner really needs to look at what's in the best interest of their organization. And for some people, it's going to be revamping your space. For others, it's going to be pivoting the very core of what it is you do. Other people are going to shift to a combination of virtual and in-person work, real time. And even as you continue into the future, you'll be operating differently than you did pre-COVID. I think that there's very few organizations, even if they're doing the same type of work, that are experiencing business as usual. Now, something has shifted, something has changed. So for example, in my company, we needed to shift from holding collaborative planning sessions with people in person, which was one of the hallmarks of our business and one of our differentiators, because we didn't do disaster planning with everyone the same way that everybody else did. We weren't going off and doing plans in a vacuum. We were developing collaborative plans. But that needed to shift as a result of COVID to working with people in a virtual environment. So it has a different feel to it. It has a different look to it. Our products look different as a result. So what I'm wondering is, for you as business owners, what are the things that you've had to do to that you've had to consider in reopening your business or adapting your business that surprised you? So do I have a couple of volunteers that
Yeah,
raise your hand?
you do. You have Brett Warner who had his hand raised, but I cannot unmute him. Brett, can you unmute?
Sure, here I am. So I'm just curious, and I don't want to be confrontational, but I mean, how do you feel about all the orders and laws? I'm concerned about getting orders from the government, and I don't mind suggestions, highly suggested, and then personal responsibility. At the same time, I'm feeling that we're giving up plenty of rights under fear. And so I know you're not like a positional person, but I'm concerned that everybody's just moving forward and saying, accept all this, while we lay down a lot of our personal constitution issues. And my office has a lot of things that was done before the orders were even done. So I closed my office before it. I worked with rents with my tenants before I was ordered. I did many of things, and then all these orders come along, and now, you know, we have contracts that are not, basically we're totally valid, and now they're not, because in a sense, I had a lease and now it's not enforceable. And even though I wasn't going to enforce it, I'm mandated. So mankind's good is not allowed to rise when we get orders from whatever, Compass or the king or the governor. So I'm concerned about Americans not being allowed to make personal choice with high suggestions, still with all the data on CDC. And then you have to deal with lawsuits if you're not personally responsible. I just am concerned about just all the forward words. Let's just get on the boat and in fear, and everybody don't question. And so I don't want to make this a political topic, but it is where, I mean, today there's no resistance at all from America, and I'm worried about the fear. And I'll stop there because I can ramble, but I do appreciate the time and the question. If you want to pass on it and not go in this direction, I do understand it is. A lot of people would rather remain silent. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to acknowledge your concern. And I think that each of us in our businesses have a personal perspective about how we feel about what's going on right now. And that my topic today is really about what are we doing in response to what it is we've been given, and how are we adapting, at least right now, how are we adapting to that? And I think that the question you've raised is another one, perhaps better for a different forum.
Thank you, Sandra. Rebecca also has a comment or question.
Yes, I have been teaching classes online because I can no longer do classes, live classes with people coming into my office space. So, but the nice thing is that everybody's adjusting to that and is very willing to do that. And I'm doing everything online now. And also my business, the consulting aspect of it, people are either emailing or actually we're Zooming or on phone calls. Any way we can. I work with all my clients that way. And they are actually now, my business is growing because I'm now able to work with people all over the state of Washington. And that's how my business has grown.
So it sounds like you've had people have a really positive response to some of the changes that you've made in response to COVID-19.
Absolutely. And they've been really excited about the fact that I am doing everything online now.
Mm-hmm. I know I was happy that my doctor could see me online, that I didn't have to go in.
I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a great one. Do we have anyone else who'd like to share something that surprised them?
No other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so I'm going to move on then to what lessons have we learned? And my questions here are really associated with, what is it that we found that has worked well, and similar to what Rebecca just shared, that her clients are happy that she's able to do this online. There's also those things that haven't worked well. And I think we also heard about that, that some people feel that their rights are being impacted. But I'm curious, with you and your business and how it is you've adapted, those things that you've done, what is it that you would do different in the future? Are there some things that you've learned, some best practices that you're putting into place now and carrying forward? How about some of those things? Please share your experiences with us if you would.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I am not seeing comments. So folks, what have you learned?
So I'll give a couple of examples and give people an opportunity to either raise their hand or put something into the chat. So for us, it's been tools, looking at a different suite of tools than we've used in the past. And one of the things we've brought into play is actually Teams, Microsoft Teams, because before we were always much closer and we could get together or find opportunities to be on site and do some of the things that we needed to. Between the amount of emails that are coming in now with all of the latest updates, the latest and greatest of all the changes that we're living with, and people not being in their workspaces, what we found is Teams is allowing us to have a real-time dialogue with each other throughout the day. So that's just one example, and we will be carrying that forward into the future. Anybody else have anything?
Sandra, I can kind of build on that a little bit with respect to tools. My team here at my office has really embraced all of the virtual technology that is available to be used when recruiting staff members, and it's been really exciting for me to see how they have jumped in and not just learned one or two platforms and so forth, but also begun to get really creative in how it gets used so that we can go out and recruit and find people and put them into employment situations. That has been really inspiring to me to watch the team just go all in on, okay, yeah, and now we're playing by a new game and a new set of rules. So it's been good.
So Rosalind has a comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess two things that I've discovered by working remotely and having more meetings through Zoom is that, first of all, it actually saves you a lot of time if you're not driving around all over the place. And I'm finding I can get more done in the day when I stay at home and Zoom for meetings. The second thing is I recently realized that it really opens up my market to the rest of the country. I had resisted working with a lot of out-of-state clients that would require travel because I was trying to balance my quality of life with my work. And now that everybody is so much more comfortable having virtual meetings, I feel like, yeah, clients on the East Coast, I'm very interested in working with because it's not going to kill all of my personal time flying back and forth across the country. So those are kind of two positives that have come out of this situation.
Great. Thank you.
This is Teresa. I'm going to jump in and echo those comments about the use of tools. It's been a steep learning curve for many of us to become comfortable operating in a Zoom environment and the need for constant communication. And, you know, I mean, who knew that we had to have special lighting when we were going to be having a conversation? But it helps a lot to, oh, and a bird just flew in my window. But the other thing that I recognize is that we as an organization have become much more fluid in what our priorities are. When this all hit, we had just completed our work plan for 2020 and basically had to, you know, only a breath of time to insert a very general comment about working through COVID and focusing on helping businesses survive. But since then, all of our attention has been focused on COVID, on helping businesses. It's business as usual, bye-bye. This is what we're doing now. And just even with these webinars week to week, it's like, what do people need to know about now? What's the most important topic? And your feedback on that subject is really valuable to us.
Great. Thank you, Teresa.
Oh, I have another hand, Susan.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm unmuted now. Is that?
Yep.
Okay. So one thing that I have found is that I've worked from home for several years, and what I'm hearing from a lot of the people that I work with is that there's a whole emotional and life view that changes for them when the work is always right there all the time. It takes a real balance to be able to say, okay, I'm working from home. It's always sitting right there. I never go home from work. Everything is always needing to be done. It's like a new level of burden on people, and it causes some stress and some burnout if you can't if you can't separate those things easily, and it becomes a little bit of a challenge. And I think that that's one thing that we need to address on some level, of trying to know when you have to be at work, and because you're always accessible, how to avoid the Zoom burnout that a lot of people have faced, and how to actually find a way to unwind away from work when the work is always just sitting right there and there's always a plethora of things to do.
I find that seems to be a very important point, and I've also heard from many people that they're struggling with that. And I can speak for myself and regarding Zoom burnout, particularly in my desire to know what's going on and know what's happening and stay up to date. I had to really limit myself in terms of the number of Zoom calls I was willing to be on in a day, or even in a week, because it just became overwhelming.
I've heard that from a lot of people. I think it's a big thing that we need to learn how to manage. Yes. And we need to know how to protect our time, protect ourselves mentally, and protect the people that we go on meetings with when we're already burned out, because we have a tendency to not be as pleasant on the 7th Zoom call as we were on the first 2.
So we do have a request about asking when participants respond that they can say what their business is. I know Susan is an accountant. Rebecca is a consultant helping small business. Rosalind is a consultant, and Brett is in real estate. And I think that I covered them all. So reminder, we do want to have a few minutes at the end to answer questions about the PPP loans and the new changes. So let's move on. No other hands are up.
Okay. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is what your plans are should there be another wave. And I know that there's a lot of discussion that it's a matter of when, not if. But along the lines of what we've been talking about, there's so much that we've learned that it's really important that we capture it in writing and develop a concise plan. And then should another wave come about, you already know exactly what it is you're going to do. So say you've gone ahead and opened. Let's say you're a real retail organization or even a service organization that has physical space. And you go back into that space. And then we have another wave and we are told we need to stay at home again. Based upon what it is you've learned this first time around, I'm sure that there are things that you would do different. And it's really important that we create those blueprints now while it's fresh in our mind, so that if we need to go backwards, we're going backwards actually from a place of being ahead. So as you do that, there's a couple of things you need to ask yourself. And it's really about what it is you need to have in your plan. What is it you need to have considered? So what is your most important work? I know some people have pivoted. So what you would have done 3 months ago, you're going to do something different now. And who is it that you need to do that work? You may have discovered that your staffing needs are different than what they were previously, and that you want to hire for some new things. And some of the people who you may have furloughed, you don't want to bring back because you don't have need of those skills. And then you have the question, just like you do now, of your work locations and where will people be working from? Will you do it the same way that you did this time? Or have you learned something that may say, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll rent a space and we'll put 1 or 2 people in different rooms of that space, or potentially everybody goes back home. There's just a lot to look at and consider. And then you also need to make sure that those critical systems and those processes that people need to do their jobs, that they have been tuned up to reflect what it is you've learned and how it is you want to do things in the future, as well as having your human resources and your financial systems set up. We already know that you need a new position now based upon coming into phase 2. So there'll be another focus on health that there hasn't been there before. And your communication and systems and protocols, you may want to upgrade some systems from what you've used in the past, and others you might want to let go of. So rather than going into those in detail, I think what I'll do is invite you to ask me, reach out if you have questions, or if you'd like to schedule a complimentary session to talk about how you're evaluating your continuity going forward. And thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandra. And Jamie, if you want to take the floor to talk about what you see as the recent changes in the ever-changing world of PPP.
Great, thanks. Yeah, the interesting thing is in that survey that I saw that so many people either said they hadn't taken advantage of PPP because they were concerned about maybe the complexity of the forgiveness or whatever, or thought that they didn't need it. And for those of you who don't need it, good on you. That means you've you've probably been doing some pivots and some great thinking in terms of how you can be successful now, or maybe somehow COVID-19 didn't really affect your business, and that's great. But I would say that this is an awesome opportunity for just about any business. And what they did was they rolled this out, and then they've been patching the holes ever since and making it easier and easier to forgive. And what they're at now is saying that you've got 24 weeks to spend the money, or up until December 31st, whichever comes first. You now only have to spend 60% on payroll. And while it was called a cliff, because if you didn't spend 60%, then none of it would be forgiven. And then the Treasury came through within 24 hours and said, nah, never mind about the cliff. That's how fast, things are changing. And so, the one thing I would say is, the things for you to consider, the only reasons not to is if you're doing the math and somehow figure out that because you can't get tax credits for the PPP money because it's a grant, and that's, the Treasury is considering that double dipping, so you will have to pay higher taxes on your revenue, because you can't deduct, the payroll and other expenses that are being paid by the PPP, if that makes sense. So there is a little hit there. The other thing is, they're starting to loosen the requirements for the full-time equivalency. It was that you had to have 100% full-time equivalency to get the full forgiveness of the loan. Meaning even if you had like 2 part-time people before, you could have 1 full-time or 2 part-time, but you still have to have that 1 FTE equivalent to get it. But now there's ways, to get this, they call it safe harbor, where if, for example, you don't hire back one of your employees, but that employee, signs, agrees that they were asked to come back and they chose not to come back, you still get your full forgiveness, even though you don't have the same FTE as, from 2019. And now they're looking at other ways to give that too. I mean, there's even the Consumer Bankers Association are begging right now for everything under, all the PPP loans under $150,000 to be automatically forgiven. So that's just, who knows, that may or may not happen. But what I would say is it's just getting easier and easier to take advantage. So unless you do the math and say that the tax hit from not being able to deduct the expenses that the PPP paid for is so onerous, it's almost, like it's money being left on the table, so you can go to Kitsap SBDC, sign up for a counseling session if you want to discuss it further. But what I'm trying to tell people is, do the math, and unless there's some strange situation you're in, you probably are going to, have a financial benefit to applying for the PPP.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm glad that you put in the plug to set up a time with you. And as always, we appreciate that our speakers always offer opportunity to follow up with them as well. So don't forget that you can reach out to Monica and Sandra. The PowerPoints will be posted. Teresa, do we have a slide for next week? Next week, we're going to help you up your game in all these online presentations we're doing. So we're looking forward to that. We have Madeline Pratt coming back, and wow, it just left. Oh, Nancy Boss. We'll both be talking about getting your online presentation style polished. So we're looking forward to that. As always, everything is updated daily regarding blog posts, webinars coming up, etc. So we look forward to seeing you then. And with that, we thank you for attending and have a great day.